My sister dumped her autistic son on me every day for years, until I found his birth certificate in the attic, with my name listed as the mother. They'd been using my own autism diagnosis to make me the perfect babysitter for the son they forced me to have at 12. My sister dumped her autistic son on me every day for years, until I discovered why I was the only one who understood him. In my family, the youngest was expected to drop everything at any time, to babysit whatever kid needed watching because you don't have real responsibilities yet. My sister Lauren started dropping her autistic son at our house when I was 14, sometimes literally pushing him through the door mid-meltdown while she reversed out of the driveway. She'd text me from her car that something came up, leaving me with a screaming 3-year-old who couldn't tell me why he was slamming his head against the wall. I didn't understand autism then, only that my sister had decided her kid was my problem now. The arrangement became official during a family dinner where Lauren cried into her pasta about how exhausted she was. Mom rubbed her back while Dad made declarations about family responsibility. They discussed my new schedule like I was furniture. They were rearranging, mapping out my afternoons and weekends around Ethan's therapy appointments and Lauren's need for breaks. The expensive special schools meant everyone had to pitch in, they explained. And pitching in meant me giving up everything that made me feel like a normal teenager. By 16, I knew Ethan's routines better than my own class schedule. His sandwiches had to be cut into perfect triangles, no crust, peanut butter spread exactly to the edges. The TV volume could only be set to even numbers. Any deviation from his expected patterns triggered meltdowns that left me with bruises up my arms from trying to keep him from hurting himself or destroying the house. When Lauren saw the marks, she'd wave them away with comments about how he didn't mean it, how I just needed to learn his triggers better. My friends stopped inviting me places after the 5th or 6th time I had to cancel. Sophie's pool party happened without me because Ethan was having a bad day. The school dance came and went while I tried to calm him down from a meltdown about his favorite show being preempted. Driver's ed became impossible because someone needed to be home when his special bus arrived. My social life evaporated while Lauren posted Instagram photos from wine nights with her friends, spa days she desperately needed, weekend trips with whatever boyfriend she had that month. Then Tyler showed up in October and sat behind me in history class. He didn't know I was the girl who always left early, always canceled plans, never made it to anything. We started talking because he needed notes. Then we were hanging out after school by the parking lot while he showed me stupid videos on his phone. I'd have maybe 20 minutes before racing home, but he never made it weird. He'd talk about traveling after graduation, about concerts in cities I'd only seen in movies, about a life that seemed impossibly free. When he invited me to a party on Friday night, I knew better than to hope, but asked anyway. Lauren actually laughed when I brought it up at dinner, a harsh sound that made my stomach drop. She reminded everyone that she had plans that night, that Ethan only tolerated me as a babysitter, that he'd have a complete breakdown if anyone else watched him. Mom immediately agreed, adding comments about selfishness and family duty that I'd heard so many times they'd lost all meaning. The night Tyler ended things, we sat in his car while rain hammered the windshield. He kept his hands on the steering wheel and told me he really liked me, but couldn't compete with my family situation. After he drove away, I walked to my front door through the rain to find Ethan screaming about his chicken nuggets being the wrong shape while Lauren texted from her date about how to handle it. That dinner became my breaking point. I tried explaining how I was drowning, failing classes because I couldn't study, losing friends because I never showed up, watching my teenage years disappear into endless babysitting sessions. Lauren rolled her eyes and called me dramatic. When I told her to F off, the silence that followed felt like a bomb going off. Dad's hand slammed the table hard enough to make the plates jump. The lectures that followed about disappointment and family responsibility blurred together into white noise. Being grounded meant nothing when I was already trapped, but they took my phone and laptop anyway, and the babysitting doubled as punishment for my ingratitude. Since I was home anyway, they reasoned, I might as well be useful. My window became my escape route. First just walking the neighborhood at night, breathing air that didn't smell like juice boxes and meltdowns. Then meeting my friend at the park where she'd share her vodka-spiked Slurpee and catch me up on all the normal teenage drama I was missing. The night Mom caught me climbing back through my window, she threatened worse punishments, earlier curfews, constant supervision, but I kept leaving. Every successful escape felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Finally, they got sick of threats and locked me in completely, window and all. By day 3 of being trapped, I was so bored I explored the attic. Everything was covered in dust except one filing box tucked behind old photo albums. Inside were medical files with my name, autism spectrum disorder, diagnosed age 4, same as Ethan. Page after page of therapy notes and treatment plans my parents discontinued. A letter from my doctor, circled in red. Parents inquired about using patient as companion for sister's similarly diagnosed child, strongly advised against. The date was a week before I started babysitting. They knew why I understood him, why I could calm his meltdowns, why I knew exactly what he needed. They'd used my own condition against me. I heard footsteps on the stairs and shoved everything back, but I'd seen the last document in the box, Ethan's birth certificate with my name listed as the mother. I frantically shoved documents back into the box as Mom's footsteps reached the attic door. The birth certificate slipped from my trembling fingers, fluttering behind a wooden beam just as the door creaked open. Mom's eyes swept the dusty space, narrowing when they landed on me sitting cross-legged near the old photo albums. She attempted casual conversation about what we'd have for dinner, but her gaze kept darting around, checking if anything looked disturbed. I mirrored her fake normalcy, mentioning I was just bored and looking for old books to read. My mind raced with the impossible truth. Lauren was listed as Ethan's grandmother on that certificate. Mom's hands shook slightly as she straightened a stack of boxes that didn't need straightening. I claimed I'd been searching for my old fantasy novels, keeping my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. Mom's forced smile didn't reach her eyes as she insisted I come downstairs immediately. The way she said it made my stomach stomach drop. Then she added the words that changed everything. Lauren's here with something important to discuss. In the kitchen, Lauren sat with Ethan at the table. He was lining up his crackers in perfect rows while she scrolled through her phone. My parents exchanged loaded glances as I entered. Lauren looked up and announced she'd been offered an amazing job opportunity in another state. The words hit me like ice water. If she took Ethan away now, I might never see him again. Never get answers. Never protect him from whatever truth they were all hiding. I watched Ethan organizing his crackers with the same methodical precision I'd used as a child with my toys. He looked up at me and smiled, reaching for my hand with unusual affection. His small fingers wrapped around mine, and the touch felt achingly familiar, like something deep in my bones recognized him. My parents quickly redirected his attention to Lauren, but I caught her flash of panic when he resisted, still clinging to me. The room's tension thickened as everyone pretended this was normal. Claiming I needed the bathroom, I slipped out but detoured to my parents' room instead. Their laptop sat open on the bed. My heart hammered as I quickly scanned the screen. An email thread was open. Exchanges with a family lawyer about finalizing an adoption. The subject line made my blood freeze. Ethan's adoption. Urgent timeline. The most recent message discussed court dates and necessary documentation. Dad's footsteps echoed in the hallway. I barely managed to close the laptop and step back before he appeared in the doorway. His expression hardened instantly. He knew I'd seen something. We stood there for a moment, him blocking the exit, me trying to look casual despite my racing pulse. He didn't say anything, just gestured for me to return to the kitchen. Back at dinner, my parents spun Lauren's move as a wonderful opportunity for everyone. Mom kept emphasizing how I'd finally have my freedom back, could focus on school, maybe even date again. Lauren avoided eye contact while cutting Ethan's sandwich into perfect triangles. The whole conversation felt rehearsed, like they'd practiced these lines. My phone buzzed. A text from Emma asking if I was okay. She'd driven by earlier and seen me in the attic window looking upset. Before I could respond, Mom confiscated my phone, citing the grounding rules they'd apparently decided still applied. That night, sleep was impossible. I retrieved the old digital camera I'd hidden months ago in my closet. Through my window, I could see Mom's reflection in the glass as she checked on me. Once her footsteps faded, I zoomed in on the reflection, trying to capture any detail from her glasses that might show that birth certificate page. After dozens of attempts, I managed to get a blurry but readable shot. The father's name section was blank, but everything else was clear. My name, my age when Ethan was born, the truth they'd tried to bury. The next morning, Ethan had a complete meltdown when Lauren tried explaining the move. He clung to me, repeatedly saying he wanted to stay with me, his words slurred but desperate. Lauren's carefully maintained mask slipped as she snapped at him to stop being difficult. The sharp edge in her voice made him cry harder. I held him while she stormed out to the porch, leaving me to calm the child who was apparently my son. At breakfast the following day, Mom cheerfully discussed all my future possibilities once I was free from babysitting duties. Dad mentioned a boarding school pamphlet that had conveniently arrived. They'd researched programs for troubled teens with special needs. The isolation tactic was obvious: ship me away before I could tell anyone the truth. I played along, asking questions about the programs while memorizing every detail I'd need to fight back. Later, while organizing my closet on Mom's orders, I found my old diary hidden behind a shoebox. Flipping through it, I discovered pages from an entire year had been carefully removed. The entries before showed typical 11-year-old concerns. The entries after were different. Shaky handwriting, mentions of feeling sick, references to getting better from something never specified. The gap aligned perfectly with when Ethan would have been conceived. Lauren dropped Ethan off the next morning for what she called one last normal week. Her new boyfriend waited in the car, drumming on the steering wheel. She whispered urgently to Mom about keeping everything stable until the paperwork was done. They thought I was upstairs, but I heard every word from the hallway. Mom assured her it would all be handled by Friday. 3 days to figure out the truth and stop whatever they were planning. My parents scheduled an emergency therapy appointment, claiming concern about my recent behavior. The therapist seemed oddly focused on my false memories and attention-seeking behaviors. I love how Mom's trying to sell the whole "you'll have your freedom back" thing like she's a used car salesman, while our OP is sitting there with evidence that would make Sherlock Holmes proud. Can we also talk about Dad just standing in that doorway like some kind of hallway bouncer? The man didn't even need words, just pure dad energy blocking the exit. She kept steering the conversation toward my autism diagnosis, how it might make me confused about reality. When I mentioned the documents I'd found, she dismissed them as misunderstandings. She'd been treating our family for years, she said, including sessions I didn't remember. The realization that they'd been laying groundwork for this gaslighting made me physically sick. During Ethan's afternoon nap, I slipped out of the house. The library was only a 15-minute walk. Mrs. Chen, who'd known me since childhood, looked surprised to see me. She commented on how I'd disappeared for a while when I was 12, how my family had suddenly stopped attending library programs. When I asked about 2019 events, she pulled up the old newspaper archives. In a group photo from a summer reading program, she pointed to where I should have been standing. The space was empty. I'd been erased from public life for months. Back home, Ethan's behavioral therapist mentioned to my parents that he kept talking about having 2 moms, suggesting confusion about family structure. Mom quickly insisted it was just his autism causing confusion, that he mixed up caregivers. The therapist seemed unconvinced but didn't push. I watched from the doorway as she made notes, probably documenting the inconsistencies she was noticing. That evening, I studied Ethan's features carefully while helping him with his puzzle. The shape of his nose, the way his hair curled at the temples, the specific shade of brown in his eyes, all mirrors of my childhood photos. How had I never seen it before? Or had I always known on some level, some deep instinct that made me understand him in ways no one else could? Emma's older sister Jade texted me privately that night. She was in college now, but remembered remembered when I'd gone to stay with relatives during 8th grade. She'd always wondered why I came back so different, so quiet. Her parents had told her I'd needed specialized treatment for behavioral issues, but she'd never believed it. She mentioned how hollow I'd looked when I returned, how my parents had hovered over me constantly for months afterward. I convinced Jade to meet me at the park during Ethan's therapy appointment. She revealed more details, how my parents had told everyone I was struggling with my autism, needed intensive treatment, how Lauren had supposedly been away at college but came back with a baby right around the same time I returned, how the timeline had never quite added up, but no one questioned grieving parents dealing with a difficult situation. Lauren arrived early to pick up Ethan that day, catching me showing him our old photo albums. She yanked them away, but not before I saw it. A photo of me holding newborn Ethan that had been crudely cut out, leaving a person-shaped hole in the family memory. Her face went white when she realized what I'd seen. We stared at each other across the living room, the truth hanging between us like a blade. That night, Ethan's crying woke the entire house. My parents sent me to calm him, as always. He clung to me in the dark, whispering through his tears. Lauren had told him I wasn't really his mom, but he knew better. He knew I was the one who really cared about him most. His words, slurred but certain, broke something inside me. I held him until he fell asleep, planning my next move. The farewell dinner announcement came 2 days later. Mom's voice carried forced cheer as she explained they were inviting extended family and close friends to wish Lauren well on her new adventure. I recognized the strategy immediately. Surround themselves with witnesses who'd support their version of events. The guest list read like a roster of everyone who might take my side if they knew the truth. I spent hours in my room writing down every fragment of memory from ages 11 and 12. Certain smells triggered visceral reactions I couldn't explain. Antiseptic hospital corridors, the specific brand of prenatal vitamins Mom used to take. Thunder still made me curl into myself, though I couldn't remember why. The gaps in my memory aligned perfectly with Ethan's conception timeline, a 9-month void where my childhood had been erased. Uncle Marcus arrived early to help with dinner preparations. He found me in the kitchen arranging vegetables and mentioned privately how he'd never understood why my parents sent me away that year. His confession hit me like a physical blow. I'd begged him for help before leaving, terrified of something I couldn't name. My parents had insisted it was autism-related paranoia, that I needed specialized treatment for my own good. When I pressed for more details, Marcus reluctantly admitted I'd seemed terrified of someone specific, but wouldn't say who. His own son had autism, and he'd never seen the behaviors my parents described in me. The doubt in his eyes told me he'd always suspected something wasn't right, but had chosen family loyalty over uncomfortable questions. Alone in my room, I sketched timeline fragments on notebook pages I kept hidden behind my dresser. Medical appointments Mom claimed were for specialized autism treatment aligned with pregnancy checkpoints, first trimester screening, anatomy scans, glucose tests. Each therapy session matched a prenatal milestone. The evidence accumulated like puzzle pieces, forming a picture I'd been trained not to see. The dinner arrived with a parade of relatives and family friends. I attempted to pull Aunt Sarah aside to mention the documents I'd found, but she dismissed my concerns immediately. Parents always did what was best, she insisted, suggesting I needed more therapy to deal with my confusion. Her patronizing tone made it clear she'd already been briefed on my supposed delusions. Emma arrived uninvited halfway through dinner, claiming she was worried about me. Her unexpected presence disrupted my parents' carefully orchestrated performance. She mentioned casually how different I'd been after returning from my treatment, how I'd gone from outgoing to withdrawn overnight. Other guests began shifting uncomfortably as her observations didn't match the narrative they'd been fed. Using Ethan's bedtime routine as cover, I excused myself and slipped into Lauren's room. Her suitcase lay open on the bed, half packed for a move that might never happen. Buried beneath folded clothes, I found adoption papers with a court date set for next week. The timeline was accelerating. Once finalized, I'd have no legal claim to my own child regardless of what evidence I found. Mrs. Patterson from next door cornered me in the hallway as I returned downstairs. She'd been drinking wine and felt chatty, reminiscing about when I'd returned from my aunt's house with baby Ethan. The story had always confused her, my parents claiming Lauren had him while away at college. Then suddenly I was his primary caregiver. She remembered how devoted I'd been to the baby, like a little mother, before the family narrative shifted to make Lauren the mom. I maintained composure while she rambled about how several neighbors had noticed the switch, but assumed it was a private family matter. Her casual observations confirmed what I'd suspected. The deception had been sloppy, held together only by people's reluctance to ask uncomfortable questions. The adoption deadline loomed, creating urgency that made my hands shake. Legal channels would require proof and time I didn't have. After the guests left, I confronted Lauren in the garage while she loaded leftover food into the freezer. The mask she'd worn all evening cracked when I demanded the truth. She admitted it had been better this way, that I couldn't have handled it at 12 years old. Her voice broke as she insisted they'd protected me from something that would have ruined my life more than it already had. The revelation hung between us as she explained how our parents had paid for her college, her car, now this job placement, all to maintain the lie. She claimed she'd been protecting me, but her hands shook violently when she mentioned him. Before I could demand who he was, Dad appeared in the doorway, his expression dark with warning. He escorted Lauren inside while making it clear that false accusations destroy families. Back inside, I overheard several family friends quietly discussing my concerning behavior in the living room. Mom tearfully suggested my autism made me create elaborate fantasies to cope with feeling replaced by Ethan. The gaslighting campaign had begun in earnest, each person being fed a slightly different version of my supposed instability. The next morning, I discovered Grandma's old journal while searching for more evidence in the attic. Her careful handwriting documented increasing concerns about a family friend who paid inappropriate attention to me. David, who'd helped with yard work and home repairs, had suddenly moved moved away just before I was sent for treatment. The timeline matched perfectly. Her final entry on the subject simply read, "I should have protected her." Sunday service at church became another performance of family perfection. I noticed how certain longtime members avoided eye contact with our family, how one couple deliberately chose seats across the sanctuary from us. The weight of unspoken knowledge hung in the air like incense, everyone maintaining silence to preserve comfortable lies. Emma helped me break into the school's old records room during her volunteer shift. My 7th grade attendance records showed a 5-month absence marked as medical leave, with no specifics. The return date was exactly 2 weeks after Ethan's birthday. We photographed everything, building a paper trail that proved the timeline even if it couldn't prove the cause. Despite her parents' warnings about getting involved with family drama, Emma refused to abandon me. She'd saved strange texts I'd sent during that lost year, messages about being scared, about things that hurt, about wanting to come home. Reading them made my chest tight with phantom memories just out of reach. Together, we pieced together fragments that painted an ugly picture. My personality change had been dramatic and noticed by everyone. The sudden appearance of baby Ethan, Lauren's convenient return from college despite no one remembering her leaving, our family's abrupt move to a different neighborhood. All of it formed a pattern of covering up something too terrible to acknowledge. The weight of collective denial had shaped my entire adolescence. The question of whether to traumatize Ethan with the truth tortured me. He deserved honesty, but he also deserved a childhood free from the ugliness that had stolen mine. I decided to gather evidence while protecting him from details no 5-year-old should carry. The truth could wait until he was old enough to understand without being destroyed by it. Confronting Mom while she tended her garden became a turning point. When I mentioned Grandma's journal, her face drained of color. She stammered about protecting everyone from that situation, about making impossible choices. Her slip revealed what I'd suspected. They'd known exactly what happened, but chose family reputation over justice. Medical records from that time would prove everything, but she admitted they'd been destroyed years ago. Lauren began pulling away from the plan, telling her boyfriend she needed to postpone the move. My parents responded by threatening her college loans, reminding her how much she owed them for maintaining her role. The cracks in their united front widened as each person's self-interest competed with the shared lie. The power dynamic shifted as I realized their control came from everyone's complicity. Each person protecting their own interests had built the cage that trapped me. But secrets have expiration dates, and theirs was running out. Mrs. Patterson just casually dropping truth bombs after a few glasses of wine, completely unaware she's basically solving the whole mystery while thinking she's just making small talk. I love how the biggest revelations come from the tipsy neighbor who just wanted to chat about old times. The community that had looked away was beginning to look closer. Emma arranged an accidental encounter with Dr. Kumar, my old pediatrician, during a supervised pharmacy run. In the vitamin aisle, speaking quickly while Mom browsed nearby, the doctor confirmed she'd diagnosed my autism, but my parents had insisted on stopping therapy. She'd also treated me for trauma at age 12, but my parents switched doctors when she asked too many questions. The medical establishment had failed me, but individuals within it remembered. Other families at Ethan's therapy center began noticing inconsistencies in our family story. One mother mentioned that Ethan constantly talked about me as his real mom, that he'd draw pictures of our family with me at the center. The truth was spreading organically through a 5-year-old's innocent honesty, harder to contain than any accusation I might make. My parents' options narrowed as their carefully maintained narrative showed cracks. Dad suggested a family vacation that sounded more like relocation, visiting colleges in distant states, looking at opportunities, far from anyone who knew our history. The proposed timeline coincidentally aligned with the adoption hearing. Dr. Kumar took a tremendous risk by revealing she'd kept copies of my medical records despite regulations. She'd suspected abuse and couldn't let potential evidence disappear. Another family, she mentioned carefully, had left town hastily right after my treatment ended. The pattern of cover-up extended beyond my family, a community-wide conspiracy of silence. I protected Ethan from the growing tension by maintaining his routines with obsessive precision. Every interaction was documented through photos and videos on the old digital camera, building a record of the care I'd provided for years. He thrived under consistent attention, his development leaping forward when anxiety didn't consume our days. Emma's family offered me sanctuary if needed, their guest room a potential escape route. Other community members who'd noticed oddities over the years began sharing observations with each other. The whisper network that had once maintained silence now carried questions. My parents' attempts to isolate me failed as unexpected allies emerged. Their manufactured emergencies lost effectiveness as patterns became obvious. Every time I made progress toward truth, suddenly Ethan would have a crisis only I could handle, or Lauren would need immediate help with something urgent. The manipulation was transparent now, desperate moves in a game they were losing. Mrs. Hoffman, the elderly church pianist, approached me after service with tears in her eyes. She'd seen me looking gravely ill at 12, had been told it was a medical condition. She'd never believed it, but had stayed quiet, respecting family privacy. Now, watching history potentially repeat with Ethan, her conscience wouldn't allow continued silence. My reputation in the community shifted as people realized I'd been the stable caregiver all along. Ethan's teachers praised my dedication while questioning Lauren's sporadic involvement. The narrative my parents had crafted began unraveling as observed reality contradicted their claims. Hidden in Mom's jewelry box beneath tangled necklaces, I found a hospital bracelet, baby boy, followed by my last name, Ethan's birth date, and my patient ID number. Physical proof that no amount of gaslighting could erase. The adoption hearing was 3 days away. Speaking up would mean revealing everything, but staying silent meant losing my son forever. The next morning changed everything. David's mother intercepted me at the mailbox, her whole body trembling. She whispered a frantic apology before fleeing going back to her house. Her son had assaulted me, and both families had covered it up to protect their reputations. The confirmation of what my body remembered but my mind had blocked shattered something inside me. The real stakes crystallized with brutal clarity. This wasn't just about Ethan's custody, but about breaking a cycle of silence that enabled predators. My parents had sacrificed my childhood to maintain their image. I wouldn't let them sacrifice Ethan's future to maintain their lie. Despite exhaustion and re-traumatization, I prepared a written statement for the adoption hearing. Truth became my weapon against years of gaslighting. Each piece of evidence, each witness willing to speak, each crack in their facade strengthened my resolve. They'd stolen my voice at 12. I was taking it back. Lauren officially withdrew from the adoption plan, moving in with her boyfriend temporarily. She couldn't maintain the performance anymore, couldn't look Ethan in the eye while stealing his mother. My parents' perfect plan crumbled as their chosen substitute mother defected. Community support grew through quiet conversations and knowing looks. The people who'd maintained police silence for years began choosing sides. My parents found their social standing, the very thing they'd sacrificed everything to protect, crumbling beneath the weight of revealed truth. Ethan's therapist became my first official victory. She formally documented concerns about the adoption, recommending further evaluation of family dynamics. The system that had failed me at 12 began working, slowly and imperfectly, but moving in the right direction. My parents made one last desperate offer through Mom's tears. They'd acknowledge me as Ethan's mother if I agreed never to reveal the circumstances. They'd craft a new lie, teenage pregnancy, hidden for my protection. I could have my son if I protected their reputation. The bargain revealed their true priorities with stark clarity. I refused. Mom's breakdown that followed exposed the warped logic behind years of deception. They'd thought erasing trauma would erase its effects. They'd believed protecting me from shame was worth stealing my choices. The parents think they're master negotiators offering this deal like it's some kind of generous gift, when really they're just trying to save face after their whole house of cards fell apart because a 5-year-old kept telling everyone who his real mom was at therapy sessions. They'd convinced themselves that love looked like lies and protection meant imprisonment. Her tears were real, but they were for herself, for the image crumbling around her. The adoption hearing loomed as I gathered my evidence and my courage. 5 years of forced caregiving had prepared me for this fight. Every meltdown managed, every routine mastered, every moment stolen from my adolescence had been training for the battle to keep my son. My phone buzzed with messages of support from unexpected sources. Emma coordinated with Jade and Uncle Marcus. Mrs. Chen offered to testify about the missing months. Dr. Kumar prepared medical records. Mrs. Patterson would confirm the timeline confusion. Even some of Lauren's friends, tired of maintaining her fiction, offered to speak truth. The night before the hearing, I sat in Ethan's room watching him sleep. His small hand clutched the stuffed dinosaur I'd bought him for his first birthday, back when everyone still pretended Lauren was his mother. Tomorrow would change everything, but tonight he was just my baby, safe in his dreams, unaware of the storm about to break. My family had built their house on a foundation of lies, each deception supporting the next in an elaborate architecture of denial. Tomorrow, I would pull the cornerstone free and watch it all come tumbling down. They'd taken my childhood, my choices, my voice. They wouldn't take my son. The evidence was ready. The witnesses were willing. The truth was armed and aimed. All that remained was to speak it in a room where lies would hold no power, where documentation would outweigh denial, where a 17-year-old girl would stand up and say, "He's my son, and I can prove it." The morning of the adoption hearing arrived with an unexpected development. My parents announced they were withdrawing the petition entirely. Mom's voice carried false warmth as she explained over breakfast that they'd reconsidered, that family should stay together. Dad nodded along, adding comments about fresh starts and moving forward. The relief that flooded through me felt premature, too easy after everything they'd orchestrated. Uncle Marcus called within the hour, offering congratulations but warning me to stay vigilant. His instincts proved correct when I discovered new documents on Mom's desk while she showered. Paperwork for a competency evaluation, questioning my ability to care for Ethan due to my autism diagnosis. The withdrawal had been a feint, buying time for a different attack angle. Extended family members began reaching out throughout the day, their messages revealing the narrative my parents had spread. Each relative had been told a slightly different version of my supposed mental health crisis, my dangerous delusions about being Ethan's mother. The groundwork for their new strategy became clear. If they couldn't adopt him away from me, they'd have me declared unfit instead. Ethan sensed the shifting dynamics, becoming clingy and anxious as the morning progressed. His usual routines couldn't calm him as he picked up on the tension radiating from every adult interaction. I maintained normalcy as best I could, making his triangular sandwiches and keeping the TV volume on even numbers, but his meltdowns increased in frequency and intensity. The therapist my parents had been seeing called to schedule an emergency family session. Her voicemail mentioned concerns about my recent behavior and the need for immediate intervention. Emma intercepted me before I could panic, reminding me that documentation worked both ways. Every photo I'd taken of Ethan thriving under my care became evidence of competence. Dr. Kumar risked her medical license by meeting me in the hospital parking garage during her lunch break. She handed over copies of my medical records from age 12, proof of pregnancy and delivery that my parents thought had been destroyed. Her hands trembled as she explained she'd kept them in her personal safe, knowing someday I might need them. The pages showed everything: the prenatal visits disguised as autism therapy, the delivery marked as emergency appendectomy. Community members who'd remained silent for years began choosing sides as the truth spread through whisper networks. Mrs. Hoffman organized other church members who'd witnessed my dedication to Ethan over the years. They compiled statements about my stability and caregiving abilities, creating a counter-narrative to my parents' campaign. Lauren's conscience finally cracked completely. She arrived at the house while our parents were out, carrying a small recording device. For months, she'd been documenting their conversations about the cover-up, initially to protect herself, but now offering them as evidence. Her hands shook as she played a recording of Dad discussing how they'd handled the David situation by ensuring his family moved away. The competency evaluation was scheduled for the following Monday. I spent the weekend preparing with Emma's help, gathering 5 years' worth of evidence showing my care for Ethan. Every developmental milestone he'd reached, every therapy session I'd attended, every routine I'd mastered, all documented through photos and notes I'd kept without realizing their future importance. David's mother appeared at our door Sunday evening, her face drawn with years of suppressed guilt. She brought a written statement from David, composed with his therapist's help, acknowledging what he'd done to me when I was 12, though I owed him no forgiveness. Having his confession in writing provided crucial documentation of why I'd been sent away. Monday morning arrived with Ethan clinging to me, somehow understanding that this day would determine our future. The evaluation took place at a neutral location, a family services office that smelled of industrial cleaning products and desperation. The evaluator, a woman with kind eyes but clinical demeanor, observed our interactions for hours. I demonstrated every aspect of Ethan's care routine while she took notes. The way I anticipated his needs before meltdowns, how I redirected his anxiety through familiar patterns, the therapeutic techniques I'd learned through necessity rather than formal training. Ethan himself became my strongest advocate, seeking comfort from me whenever the stranger's presence overwhelmed him. My parents arrived halfway through, attempting to interrupt with concerns about my mental state. The evaluator firmly directed them to wait outside, but not before I caught Mom's expression, fear mixed with dawning realization that their control was slipping. Dad's jaw clenched as he recognized several community members in the waiting room, all present to support me. The evaluation continued with formal assessments and questions about my plans for Ethan's future. I presented the support network I'd built, Emma's family offering emergency childcare, Uncle Marcus providing financial backing, Mrs. Chen volunteering tutoring help. The community that had once enabled silence now offered resources for healing. During a break, I overheard my parents arguing in the hallway. Mom wanted to withdraw everything and negotiate privately. Dad insisted they'd come too far to back down. Their united front had shattered, each now protecting individual interests rather than their shared lie. Lauren's defection had started a domino effect they couldn't stop. The evaluator interviewed character witnesses next. Ethan's teachers spoke about my involvement in his education. His therapist praised my consistency and dedication. Even parents from his therapy group testified about watching me manage his needs with patience and skill. Each statement chipped away at my parents' narrative of incompetence. Mrs. Patterson delivered particularly damaging testimony about the timeline confusion, how I'd been devoted to baby Ethan before the family story shifted to make Lauren his mother. Her wine-loosened observations from the farewell dinner now served as crucial evidence of the deception's sloppy execution. The final blow came when Lauren herself testified. She'd driven back from her boyfriend's apartment, unable to live with the guilt any longer. Her confession was halting but comprehensive. How our parents had paid her to play mother, how they'd threatened her when she wanted to stop, how she'd watched me raise Ethan while receiving none of the recognition. By late afternoon, the formal evaluation was complete. The evaluator would submit her report within 3 days, but her demeanor had shifted from clinical assessment to barely concealed sympathy. She'd seen through the layers of deception to the truth underneath, a young mother who'd been raising her son without acknowledgement for 5 years. That evening, my parents made their final attempt at control. They cornered me in the kitchen while Ethan napped, offering a deal. They'd support my custody claim if I agreed to never reveal the circumstances of his conception. They'd craft a new lie, teenage pregnancy, hidden for my protection. The bargain revealed their priorities hadn't changed, only their tactics. I refused again, my voice steady despite exhaustion. Truth had become more important than their comfort. Ethan deserved a future built on honesty, not another generation of lies. My parents' faces crumbled as they realized their power had evaporated. Without everyone's complicity, their control meant nothing. The evaluator's report arrived Thursday morning, recommending full custody remain with me. She noted my exceptional caregiving abilities despite young age and lack of formal training. The system that had failed me at 12 had finally recognized what the community had witnessed for years. I was Ethan's mother in every way that mattered. My parents responded by announcing their decision to move. Dad had found a job opportunity in another state, Mom explained to anyone who'd listen. The social consequences they'd spent years avoiding had arrived with devastating force. Their carefully maintained reputation lay in ruins, and staying meant facing judgment they couldn't deflect with lies. Uncle Marcus stepped forward with an offer that changed everything. He and his wife had extra room since their own son left for college. Ethan and I could stay with them while I finished school. The stability I'd never been allowed to provide for my son was suddenly possible. A real home instead of borrowed spaces and contested custody. The community rallied in unexpected ways. Mrs. Chen organized tutoring sessions to help me catch up on missed education. Dr. Kumar connected me with trauma counseling resources. Emma's family offered respite care when I needed breaks. The village that had failed to protect me at 12 now surrounded us with support. Lauren transferred the education fund she'd received from our parents into an account for Ethan. Her partial redemption came with an apology and a promise to be the aunt he deserved, not the false mother she'd pretended to be. Though trust would take time to rebuild, her testimony had been crucial in revealing the truth. Moving day arrived with bittersweet relief. I packed Ethan's things, his special plate, his comfort toys, the weighted blanket that helped him sleep. Each item represented years of learning his needs through trial and error. Uncle Marcus had already prepared a room just for him, painted the soft blue that didn't overwhelm his senses. My parents' departure was quiet, without the fanfare that usually accompanied their major life events. Mom hugged me stiffly at the door, whispering that she'd thought she was protecting me. I didn't offer forgiveness forgiveness she hadn't earned. Dad avoided eye contact entirely, loading boxes with the same determination he'd once used to maintain their lies. The house felt different with them gone, lighter, like windows had been opened after years of stale air. Oh man. So the parents trying to negotiate a new lie while their old one is literally falling apart around them is like watching someone try to fix a sinking ship with more holes. Hey, let's just make up a different story, because that worked so well the first time, right? And Dad suddenly finding a job in another state when the whole town knows their business is the most obvious. We're not running away, we just really love. Wherever we're going, move I've ever seen. Ethan ran through the empty rooms, his laughter echoing off bare walls. For the first time, he could just be a child without the weight of secrets pressing down on our interactions. That night in Uncle Marcus's home, I tucked Ethan into his new bed. He'd arranged his stuffed animals in the precise order that brought him comfort. As I turned to leave, he reached for my hand and spoke clearly despite his usual speech difficulties. The word home had never carried more meaning than when he said it, recognizing safety in truth rather than deception. 6 months later, I watched him play at the park with other children from his therapy group. His development had accelerated once the tension left our daily lives. He still needed routine and struggled with changes, but the constant anxiety had faded. Other parents commented on his progress, not knowing the full story but recognizing transformation when they saw it. My own healing happened in smaller increments. Therapy helped process trauma I'd been trained not to acknowledge. Support groups connected me with other young mothers navigating parenthood without traditional family structures. Education resumed with accommodations for both my autism and my parenting responsibilities. The truth hadn't fixed everything. Some days were still hard, filled with meltdowns and frustration, and the weight of responsibilities I'd never chosen. But they were honest difficulties now, faced without shame or secrets. Ethan knew I was his mother. I knew I was competent. The community knew the truth. That foundation made all the difference. Oh, look at that. Turns out the truth really does set you free. Who would have thought? I love how Ethan arranged his stuffed animals in the perfect order, because even in a new place, some things just have to be exactly right. That home moment got me a little bit, not gonna lie, especially coming from a kid who doesn't usually say much. And hey, 6 months later, he's actually playing with other kids at the park instead of being stuck in family drama. Thanks for watching.